and that's former President Biden, who appeared on The View yesterday and took responsibility for President Trump's historic return to the White House. Biden maintains he would have beaten Trump had he stayed in the race and pushed back on claims of any cognitive decline in his final year in office. Here's a portion of what President Biden's comments from the show yesterday about Vice President Kamala Harris and her failed presidential run. Here's what he said, quote, "I wasn't surprised." He says he wasn't surprised by her failed presidential run. Not because I didn't think the vice president was qualified to be president. She is. She's qualified to be president of the United States of America. I was surprised because they went the sexist route, the whole route. This is a woman. She's this, she's that. Really, I've never seen as successful and consistent of a campaign undercutting the notion that a woman couldn't lead the country and a woman of mixed race, end quote. BS. That's straight BS. See, I'm not going to let y'all get away with that. I'm not going to let you get away with that. They said we were hearing the same thing about Hillary in 2016. Hillary won the popular vote by over 3 million votes. She didn't win an electoral college vote. Why was that? James Comey comes out with some report about deleted emails, 33,000 plus, a couple of weeks or so before the election. What misogyny got to do with that? Kamala Harris goes on The View, knowing that you had open borders, knowing the crisis it caused in this country, knowing that there was an economy that was compromised by inflation, knowing there was crimes in the streets, knowing there was those kind of things going on. And she went on The View when they asked if there's anything that she would do differently than you were doing in your administration, President Biden. She said, I really can't think of anything. Everybody knows that's when she sealed her fate. Everybody knows that. But that doesn't even come close to equating the damage you did, sir. You and the former First Lady, Jill Biden. Both of you. Now, Jill Biden, I'm not going to blame but so much because that's her husband and she was standing by her husband. So when he went on the stage June 27th for a debate and completely looked inept, off or out of sync and everything in between, it was you that walked out on that stage minutes later and said you want to thank him and applaud him for doing an outstanding job. You answered every question. You did this, you did that. And then you go on The View and admit it was a flat out lie. It was a flat out lie. And that you knew you were lying. You went on The View and you said he was awful. It was bad. But that ain't what you told the voters out there. And now you're hiding behind the notion that you weren't going to let one moment, one bad moment ruin a presidency. Well, it was one bad moment. Actually, it was many. Because we saw him. There were times that we saw him and he had no business being seen. Remember when former President Barack Obama had to guide him off a stage where he didn't know where he was going? Remember when he was at the World Summit in G7, if I remember correctly, and everybody was standing together, but he was fading away and drifting away, and they had to guide him back to the line? Remember that? Remember the times that he was mumbling incoherently? There was a analyst that came on Chris Cuomo's show. I think it was Scaramucci, if I remember correctly, but I'm not sure. Anthony Scaramucci. And he came on Chris Cuomo's show on News Nation, and he said the night of June 27th, when Joe Biden debated Donald Trump, he said that he looked like an elderly person in a nursing home waiting to be fed applesauce. And it's sad as that vivid kind of picture depicting the president at the time was, no one refuted it. No one. Which brings me to the other point. You see, none of that is a big deal, sir. If you're over 80 years of age, which is no shame in it, and you served this country the way that you served in the Senate for decades, in the presidency for the 3 previous years. But in 2020, when you were elected, before you took office in January of 2021, you swore to the American public that you were there to be a transitional president. You were coming for 1 term. You just wanted to get America's house back in order and get us removed from the chaos that had ravaged us for years in the streets of America. And you were supposed to be transitional. You got there, the Dems fought off a red wave, nullified it actually. It wasn't what the Republicans thought it was going to be. The Democrats won the midterms and you were feeling yourself. And you didn't want to surrender power. So you went back on your word as a transitional president. Your wife did everything she could to cover for you, knowing that there was slippage. And now we're walking around and what are we hearing right now, President Joe Biden? We're hearing that at 82 years of age, okay, which is what you are about to be, you're talking about writing a book. And the book is going to be out in about a year. And that's about right around the time that the midterms are coming out, that the midterms will take place. So is it possible that what you're doing is what you're saying is, I'm going to come out with a tell-all book and I'm going to dime everybody out and I'm going to call out the Democratic Party so you can somehow get in the way of whatever success they're hoping to reap in the 2026 midterms? Is that what you're doing, sir? Sure sounds like it. See, this is the sickening part of politics. This is what they mean when they talk about people eating their own. Because you ain't giving a damn. You didn't want to leave office after promising you would serve 1 term. You tried to stay in power. And somehow they were able to hoodwink you into embracing a presidential debate against Donald Trump 3 months before any presidential debate had ever taken place. You got exposed. And then what do the Democrats do? They put Kamala Harris in there, bypassing primaries like every other candidate would have to experience, in large part because in 2020 she couldn't even get to Iowa. And then you sold the American public on this is what we want, this is who we want, et cetera, et cetera. Come to find out, it's a whole bunch of lies. But the reality is you're not far removed from it, Joe Biden. Because had you kept your word and committed yourself to being a transitional president and making room very early for candidates to come down the line for the Democratic nomination for the presidency of the United States, all the things that happened in the aftermath would not have been necessary. But you didn't care. Instead, you want to talk about what's for the good of the country. How could you possibly think you would have beaten Trump when inflation was taking place, when open borders had ravaged us, when the war in Ukraine against Russia was fomented even more, when the Hamas-Israeli conflict took fold? With all of this stuff happening, months removed from office, when no one really cares to hear from you at this particular juncture, you're going to go on a BBC network and then in the aftermath of that, The View, and you're going to bad talk Kamala Harris? You say you wasn't, but when you say you would have beaten Trump and that you knew she would have lost, that's bad talking her. Why did you leave out that you didn't put her in a position to win? Because you refused to step away. If you had kept your word about being a transitional president and you had made it very clear early that you would only serve 1 term, it would have paved the way for her to run for the office herself and campaign with ample time to do so. If she is what you say she is, that she's qualified to be the president of the United States of America, you could have helped her. Not just coming in at the last minute and give her an endorsement to take a shot, reportedly, at Barack Obama and the George Clooney's of the world and others. You could have helped her, but you didn't. And now when you have an opportunity to walk away into the twilight and live your final years. You talking about coming out with a book. It has to be a tell-all to get you any money. It has to be a tell-all. It's a sinister game. And you know it's bad when you can't stop playing it in your 80s. I'm not taking any tweets. I have nothing more to say. I got too much to do this week, and I'm about to get out of here. But it's a damn shame. It's a damn shame. All of this stuff that the left wants to complain about with Trump. All of this stuff that they want to complain about, whether it's Elon Musk and Doge from weeks ago, or it's the tariffs over the last few weeks, or it's what's he going to do with Harvard, or what's he going to do with freedom of speech, or what's he going to do with HBCUs, and all of these other damn questions. If Biden had kept his word and stepped away, if the Democrats had held them to it, had the strength to hold them to it. And by Democrats, I'm not talking about just elected officials. I'm talking about donors. All of this noise might have been prevented. Once again, my latest example of you bringing it on yourself. You brought it on yourself.